I died on the table. That is not a metaphor. My heart stopped beating for 6 minutes, and I should not be here telling you this story, but I saw everything while I was gone. I floated above my own body. I watched the doctors shout my name and pump my chest, and standing at the corner of that cold operating room, just beyond the light, was my father, dead for 13 years, smiling gently, like he had been waiting for me. Before I dive deep into my story, I want to thank each and every one of you who has subscribed to this channel. Your support means everything. For those who are watching but have not subscribed yet, thank you too. Please do not forget to engage. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced something like this, or know someone who has? My name is Rachel Morgan. I am a 46-year-old mother of two, living in a quiet town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I used to work as a nurse before I became a school librarian. After over a decade of long hospital shifts and endless nights of double shifts, I traded in scrubs for bookshelves. Life slowed down, and I thought the hardest part of my journey was behind me. That was until my own body betrayed me. It started as a dull ache under my ribs. I ignored it for weeks, assuming it was just indigestion. But when the pain became unbearable, I finally saw a doctor. An ultrasound revealed several gallstones. Nothing alarming, they said. It was supposed to be a routine laparoscopic surgery, minimal invasion, in and out, maybe 2 nights in the hospital. I kissed my daughter Emily and my son Brandon before heading into surgery. My husband David held my hand until they wheeled me away. I was not scared. In fact, I had been in that operating room more times than I could count, just never as the one lying under the lights. I remember the beeping of the monitor. I remember the anesthesiologist counting backward. 10, 9, 8, and then cold. It is hard to describe how it felt. One moment I was drifting into anesthesia. The next I was standing, no hovering, near the ceiling, watching chaos erupt below me. Dr. Patel, the lead surgeon, had his hands in the air. The nurse beside him was shouting, her pressures dropping. Someone else yelled, "Code Blue," and there I was, floating like mist above them all. I saw my own body, pale and lifeless on the table. I was not afraid, I was curious. I felt no pain, no panic, just stillness. That was when I noticed the corner of the room was darker than the rest. Not menacing, just shadowed. And from that shadow stepped someone I had not seen since the day we buried him, my father. He looked the same as he did in my favorite memory of him. Flannel shirt, work jeans, oil-stained hands, and that smile. The same one he gave me when I got my first bike. The same one he wore when he walked me down the aisle. He did not speak with words. He did not need to. His presence filled the space with calm. But then something changed in his eyes. He looked behind me, and suddenly his smile faded. That was when I heard the monitor give out one long flat beep, the flat line. My heart had stopped. In the distance, I could hear Dr. Patel ordering the crash cart. A defibrillator paddle was pressed to my chest. A nurse began chest compressions, but I was no longer there. The room seemed to stretch into something else. The walls melted away into light. Before I could move further into the light, my father held up his hand and pointed back toward the room, toward my body. And in the same moment, I heard something. A whisper. It was not from him. It came from somewhere deeper, like it was inside me, and outside, at the same time. It said, "Emily is not safe. My daughter." Then the light dimmed. The world around me shifted again. It was as though a vacuum had pulled me downward, back toward pain, back toward heaviness. I felt weight return to my chest. I heard my own voice screaming inside my head. My eyes opened, bright lights, masks, hands. The nurse cried out, "She is back," and I was. Back in a body that felt like lid. Back in a world where time moved slower, and air burned my throat. I could not speak, I could only cry. Not because I was alive, but because I had seen something I could not explain. And because I knew without a doubt that something was coming for my daughter. But how? And why? That was the beginning of it, and what happened next would shake everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what lies between. When I opened my eyes in the recovery room, I was not sure where I was at first. My chest ached. My throat felt raw. The lights above me were too bright, too white. Everything felt wrong. I blinked hard, trying to remember. Then it hit me. I had died. The memory rushed back like a flood. Me floating above the operating table, the panic in the room, the sound of the flatline. And my father. I remembered the calmness in his eyes, and the warning. Emily is not safe. I could not speak yet, not with the breathing tube still in. I tried lifting my hand, and a nurse rushed to my side. "You are okay now," she said softly, squeezing my fingers. "You gave us quite a scare." I wanted to ask her everything. I wanted to know how long I had been out, if I had been clinically dead, if they saw anything strange, but I could not find the strength. I drifted off again, but not into sleep, into a replay of what had happened to me. I had to make sense of it. When I left my body, it was like stepping out of a heavy winter coat. One moment I was Rachel Morgan, patient on the table. The next I was pure awareness. No pain, no weight, just thought, vision and presence. I floated high in the corner of the room. I could see the bald spot on Dr. Patel's head. I saw the red smudge on the nurse's scrubs from her rushing in with the crash cart. I saw the screen flashing code blue in red. I saw everything. Time moved differently. Seconds felt like minutes. I could take in every detail, even the heart monitor rhythm, even the surgical tools still glistening on the tray. But I felt no fear. None at all. I felt like I was home. And then the room dissolved. At first, it looked like the walls just melted away. The beeping stopped. The shouting vanished. All I could hear was my own breath, except I was not breathing. I found myself in a tunnel. That sounds dramatic, I know. People say that a lot. I saw a tunnel of light, but it was not a tunnel like a hallway or a cave. It was more like a passage. It had no walls, but I felt surrounded. The further I moved, the more I could feel warmth, like sunlight that had no source. There were no shadows. Everything glowed, and then from the distance, I heard laughter. Not loud, gentle, familiar laughter. I turned, or rather I shifted toward the sound, and I saw her. My grandmother. She had passed away when I was 16, a small bird-like woman, with warm eyes, and always a ribbon in her hair. She looked just as she had in my childhood memories, only younger, healthier. She smiled at me and said my name, not out loud, but I heard it clearly in my head. Rachel. Next to her was my Uncle Henry. I had not thought of him in years. He had died in a boating accident when I was just a child. He raised a hand and waved like we were at a Sunday picnic. More figures emerged. I recognized some, others I did not. They stood in the light, peaceful, calm, as if they were waiting. But I was not ready. A strange pull began in my chest, not painful, but urgent, like something inside me was being tugged back, toward the world I had left. I tried to stay. I remember thinking, please, not yet, because it was perfect. No worries, no pain, no fear, just love. Thick, golden love that wrapped around every thought. But then I heard something that froze me. A scream. It did not come from the light. It came from far behind me. A child's scream. And I knew it was Emily. Suddenly I saw her. Not the real her, but a version. She was crossing a street, headphones in, not paying attention. A car turned too fast. Her foot slipped on the curb. The driver did not see her. The horn blared, then black. I gasped. Even though I had no lungs, I turned to my father. He stood again at the edge of the scene. This time, his face was serious. He pointed back, toward Earth, toward the cold operating room I had escaped. "You must go back," he said without speaking. I wanted to stay. I begged him with my eyes. I had never known such peace, but he shook his head. "She needs you," he said. In that moment, the light faded, the warmth vanished, and I began falling backward, downward, crashing through everything I had left behind. The tunnel was no longer calm. It spun, twisted. I felt the weight of my body again, and then I heard my name. Rachel, Rachel, stay with us. The pain returned, the cold, the beeping. My chest slammed as the paddles hit again, and I woke up. The image of Emily in danger burned into my mind. It felt like a warning, not a dream, a vision. The doctors tried to explain it all away when I told them what I saw. They said hallucinations were common in cardiac arrest, that my brain was likely oxygen deprived, and trying to make sense of the trauma. But they could not explain how I knew that the clock on the far wall stopped ticking during the flat line, or how I knew that the scrub nurse dropped a pair of forceps just before the alarm went off, or how I knew the anesthesiologist had a picture of his newborn baby girl tucked in his breast pocket. Things I could not have seen, things I should not have known. Still, they shook their heads. But I knew. I had left my body. I had seen the other side. I had been given a warning. Emily, I had to protect her. But from what? The days that followed my surgery felt like a dream I could not shake myself out of. I returned home, wrapped in blankets and painkillers. But my mind was far from rest. My body healed, but my spirit had been stirred. That vision of Emily, the scream, the flash of headlights, the moment before impact, played over and over again in my head like a haunting movie reel. It was not just a vision, it was a warning I could not ignore. I watched Emily like a hawk. Every morning before school, I insisted on driving her. She rolled her eyes, called me overprotective, but I did not care. I could not lose her. Something about that moment in the tunnel, when my father looked at me with urgency in his eyes, told me that time was ticking. One morning, barely 2 weeks after my surgery, the air felt strange. It was late October, and the sky was heavy with grey clouds. Emily grabbed her backpack and her earbuds, heading toward the front door like she always did. She paused when she noticed I had not picked up my car keys. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. I stared at her for a long second. My heart pounded. My palms felt damp. There was something I could not explain. "Do not walk today," I said. "Please, let me drive you." "I will be fine," she replied, with a slight laugh. "It is just a few blocks." I shook my head. "Emily, please, sit down. Wait for me to grab my coat." She gave in, sensing the edge in my voice. I walked slowly, my chest still tender, but I kept my eyes on the clock the whole time. 7:44 a.m. At exactly 7:50 a.m., as we approached the intersection 2 streets from her school, we saw it. A crowd, flashing lights, a crumpled blue backpack in the middle of the street. My breath stopped. Police tape was already up. A small crowd had formed. I pulled over, my hands trembling. I could not speak. My entire body went cold. Emily gasped. That looks like Lily's bag." Lily was her best friend. They often walked together. We later learned that Lily had left early that day, eager to stop by the corner bakery before school. Headphones in, she had stepped off the curb without noticing the delivery van rushing through the yellow light. She had not made it. My knees gave out when I heard the details. I sat in silence as the words hit me. She never saw the van coming, the exact moment I had seen in my vision. The only difference, it had not been Emily. I had begged her to wait. I had begged her not to walk that day. And because of that, she lived. I should have felt relief. But the truth is, I felt guilt. Survivor's guilt, I guess. Lily's mother collapsed in grief outside the school that afternoon. Her wails echoed in my soul. I could not help but wonder, had I seen Lily's fate in my vision? Or had that warning been for Emily, and she had been spared because I listened? That night, I sat at the edge of Emily's bed, stroking her hair as she slept. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of her night lamp. Her face was peaceful, unaware of how close she had come to being a memory. I whispered to the silence, "Thank you," and that was when it happened again. Not a tunnel, not a vision, but a presence. My father. I could feel him in the room, not see him, not hear him, but feel him like a warm breath against my neck. I turned, eyes wide, and in my mind, I heard his voice. "Now you know why you had to return." And just as quickly as it came, the feeling was gone. In the weeks that followed, I began reading everything I could about near-death experiences. I watched interviews, read medical journals, and listened to stories from people like me, people who had crossed over and come back. Some spoke of tunnels, others of light, others of darkness. Some had seen people, some had seen nothing at all, but all of them, every single one had returned changed. So had I. I no longer feared death, but I respected life more than ever. Doctors eventually told me I had flatlined for just under 4 minutes. 4 minutes of no heartbeat. 4 minutes where science said I should have seen black. Nothing. But instead, I had seen more than I ever thought possible. One doctor, an older man with a quiet voice and tired eyes, pulled me aside on my last visit. "I have been in medicine for over 30 years, he said, and I have seen things I cannot explain. Whatever you saw, whatever made you listen to that instinct, do not ignore it." I nodded. I never would. Now every morning, I look at the world a little differently. The trees are brighter. The laughter of my daughter is more precious. Even the rain feels holy, because I had died, and I had come back with a message. Not one of fear, not one of punishment, but a message of connection, of purpose. I was sent back for a reason, and maybe, just maybe, you are here reading this for a reason too. Perhaps we all are.